Kaleidoscope.
Hey, it's your girl Sarah right here on the Kaleidoscope, and I'm so excited to be here today. First of all, a very, very good morning to you because I am so excited to be here today and keep you company all the way until 9 a.m. And also because I have so many things heading your way, so I'm super, super excited for that, right? But right now, we're going to be talking about space exploration and everything related to space, and I'm talking about space exploration, space hotels, and even things like aliens. Okay, so I'll be talking about all of that, and I'm super super excited to be here. Now if you have any messages, thoughts, opinions that you want to share with us, then make sure you text us on 07852 473 and I can share your opinion with everyone here, and I can also maybe have another discussion. If there's anything else that you want me to talk about as well, make sure you text me on that same number and we can get into that. Okay, but obviously we'll get into what we're supposed to be talking about today, which is obviously space exploration. Now, right now, space exploration is very big around the world. There are so many different space programs and they're conducted by different countries as well. And when you're talking about space and when you're talking about all things related to space, there's also there's even a United Nations office that is specifically for space, which is called the United Nations Office for Outer Space Affairs. It's a bit fun to pronounce when you're using the abbreviation for it because it's UNUSA, but it's I like pronouncing it, okay? But that just goes to show that even when that just goes to show that if the United Nations itself has this program that focuses on outer space, that just goes to show how important outer space actually is in this day and age, right? And obviously, because of that, we need to pay attention to this. We need to focus on it because going into space, talking about space, doing all things space is actually one big thing right now. So obviously, that's also because as humans, we've had this natural curiosity of finding what lies beyond our planet, right? And we've had so many questions, and that's why space exploration started, right? Back like when people started exploring the seas, when people started using ships, it's almost like that now. But instead, we're actually exploring we're exploring space, exploring outer life, and that's very important because it's helping a lot of us actually come up with these new inventions. It's helping us come up with different things that will actually help us in the future. If you're just tuning in, good morning. I'm super excited to be here, and we're talking about space exploration, and that is a very important trending topic right now, which is why I thought I'll tell you about it. If you have any questions, messages, shout outs, shout outs about questions or anything else that you want to share with us, that you want to talk to us about, make sure you text us on 07852 473 473. So obviously, because we're human and because we have this very curious nature where we want to know everything that is beyond what we see, because we have this inherent desire in us, we've started space exploration, right? But obviously, this isn't something that started recently. It has actually been there for a really long time. And it's very important that we talk about this now because the future is now. Okay, it's 2021. Things are changing so fast. There is so much of changes around the world, and that's why it's so important to make sure we focus on things like this, right? So obviously, getting into it, we've always had like so many questions about space exploration and what exists beyond what we see, right? And space exploration actually started way back in 1957, which means we've been doing it for about 64 years now. And that means from the time it started, we've actually made a lot of discoveries. We've had huge milestones in terms of humanity. And we had so many different things, like obviously setting human feet or foot on the moon, and big achievements like that actually really really helped us. So obviously, because it is something so important, because it has helped us so much in terms of evolution, in terms of development, and in terms of progressing. we still continue to explore the space. And even here in the United Kingdom, space exploration is such a big thing, right? Now I have some news for you about that as well, so make sure you stay tuned for that, because we will eventually get into it, because I have a lot of things to talk to you about space exploration. So obviously, when it comes to this topic, there's a lot of things we can talk about, and I'm talking about things like aliens, I'm talking about things like space exploration, space hotels, space stations. There's so many different things, and there's even that possibility where we're considering of moving to another planet just in case we can't, sustain life on this planet. Now it seems really ironic because we have one planet to take care of, and we can't even take care of that, but we're trying to move to another planet. But that is what it is right now. That's the kind of progress we've made in terms of evolution. That's the kind of progress we've made in terms of moving forward with our life, moving forward with our future, and bringing a lot of technological advancement and change to the world, right? And obviously, space exploration is on everyone's minds, and you know what I'm talking about. You know what you know that there's these new space hotels and even the new space exploration possibility, right? And I'm talking about people like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, who's going to space, who wants to explore space, and who's spending huge amounts of money on going to space. Now, another thing that it actually shows is that if you're rich enough, if you have enough money, nothing is actually impossible for you, right? That's why people like Elon Musk, that's why people like Jeff Bezos is actually going out to space. They're venturing out to space, they're exploring space, and that's why things like this is happening. So it just goes to show that if you have enough money, if you have enough funding, nothing is impossible. And there's always that very obvious question of whether whether we're doing something important, whether it makes a lot of sense to actually spend such outrageous amounts of money on space exploration, because it seems like we're not getting too much of a benefit out of it, right? So obviously, because it feels like we're spending a lot of money and not necessarily getting a lot of benefits out of it, there's always that question as well. But I'm here to actually debunk all of those doubts they're having, to make all those doubts disappear, and also make you understand and help you understand what space exploration means to us, and how it could actually help us when it comes to our future. Now, obviously, there's also other questions that we have about how why aren't we spending this money on people who actually need it? Because there is a lot of communities out there who are suffering. There's a lot of communities out there that's actually having a lot of issues, and I'm talking about things like poverty, inequality, people who even have to face discrimination when it comes to healthcare or even getting housing, simple things like that, basic human rights. So if so many people are having so many issues, if so many people are having such a hard time being alive, even on this planet, then why are we still considering space exploration? Why are we spending so much of money on exploring space? Because when you think about it, it seems quite outrageous. But don't worry, I am going to explain all of that to you, because it's important that we talk about those things as well. And it's a very obvious concern that a lot of us have, a concern that a lot of activists have about how, or rather, why we're not spending enough money on people who actually need it, and why we're just heading out into space and trying to find new life, or trying to find a new planet, or do whatever we do when we are heading out into space. So obviously that is what we'll be talking about today, and that was just me telling you about what we'll be touching on. So that's what space exploration is about, but there's a lot of other things that needs to be considered when we're exploring space, right? And I'm talking about things in terms of whether it's obviously we've established the fact that it is advantageous, although it holds a slight disadvantage, that it is more advantageous than disadvantageous, and also the fact that we really need to explore space at this point of time, that it's very important that we make these discoveries and help ourselves, because every day, as every day passes, we're all in danger, right? And when I say in danger, the universe is a big place. It's huge. There's so many things that we haven't even discovered yet. And the galaxy we live in, Milky Way, is just one galaxy. And when it comes to space, there's so many different galaxies, there's so many different planets, there's so many different stars, and it's also a very interesting thing to talk about, right? So obviously, we'll get into it. We'll get into why space exploration is so important and why we need it and why we're actually spending such such outrageous amounts of money and so much of resources on it, right? Now, obviously, when you first look at it, it seems a little bit, it doesn't really seem like the smartest thing to do, especially when we're in the middle of a pandemic, when there are so many other crises around the world. It doesn't seem like exploring space is the best thing to do. But the thing is, while we're spending so much of money on what feels like it's a small return, the exploration of space actually allows new resources to be found and new resources to be created, and that is very important because we are a planet that is currently running out of resources. That's why we're doing our best to protect our resources. That's why we're doing our best to invest in renewable energy sources, and all the things that we're doing right now is simply because the resources that we have are currently running out. And I'm talking about resources like fossil fuels, resources like that, which don't seem like they'll exist for a really long time. And there's even that whole idea that resources will now only exist until 2050. And I'm talking about non-renewable resources like fossil fuels and coal and things like that, right? And especially because we are going through a climate crisis, especially because this climate crisis has a lot of impacts on us, both detrimental. Actually, there isn't anything good about it, but there's a lot of detrimental effects when it comes to the climate crisis that is currently happening, right? So obviously, because of all those things, we really need to find an alternative way to get resources, or we need to find alternative resources. So it's very important that we actually explore space right now, and it's very, very important that we find these things, that we figure out these things. But I'll be back to talk about space exploration and everything it entails. But right now, let's head into a little break. So we can eventually get back to it.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh. So that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Ladies who ask, "Hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful?" I mean, hey, you can always have something up on your sleeve. I mean, got me thinking. You want to stand out. Why do you want to stand out though so much, especially with these kind of shirts when you're riding? There must be a purpose behind it, right?
Well, when you say a purpose, Nick, what I do, I wear the shirts mainly one because they're nice and bright, so they make me visible, especially if I'm riding on the road.
Okay. Yeah, that's very important, right? Because you want cars, yeah.
Very important. And also, like, people see me in like cafes, and perhaps I shouldn't be saying this on here, I suppose, but in the bar afterwards.
All right.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh. So that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Ladies who ask, "Hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful?" I mean, hey, you can always have something up on your sleeve. I mean, you look like a guy who would do.
You know me too well. You know me too well, Nick.
The Kaleidoscope.
Now, earlier we were talking about space exploration, and you are on the Kaleidoscope with me, Sarah, and space exploration is what we're talking about today. A very, very good morning to you. I'm so excited to be here, and I'm super excited to actually talk to you about all these things that we are talking today. And if you have any messages, if you have any thoughts, any opinions, any questions that you want to share with us, anything that you even want us to talk about, make sure you text me on 078-50473-473, and we can get talking about it, because obviously that is what we're doing right now. And obviously there's a lot of different things that we can talk about. There's so many different things when it comes to space exploration as well. Now, if you're just tuning in earlier, I was talking about space exploration and why we actually need to, why it's a thing of the future, why exploring space is a thing of the future, and why we actually need to invest more resources, why we need to make sure we are spending more time, more energy, and more resources in space, and in space exploration. So let's get into it. So I was obviously talking about how space exploration actually allows resources to be created, and how space exploration is actually helping a lot of us deal with the problems that is currently happening in our planet. And we need to understand that when we're talking about space exploration, we need to understand that it is very important that we find new resources. It's very important that we find new technology. And the only way we can do that is when we have these unlimited questions about what exists beyond the Earth, about what exists beyond our galaxy. And obviously, that is when we will keep testing our limits. That is when we'll keep testing our strengths to actually make sure that we can go beyond. What we currently see, and that we can actually help to progress the planet and help to develop the planet just by going to space and finding these new technologies. Now, I know it sounds like a ridiculous thing to say, but a lot of the technology we use right now, and I'm talking about things like prosthetic limbs, and so many other different things that we use right now, is actually simply because of space exploration. Okay, it's because we had to find these new devices, we had to find new ways to explore space, and we had to make sure that it was, not necessarily sustainable, but rather it was durable, because obviously even though we have a fair idea of what conditions are outside of space, we're not completely sure. It's not 100%, certified idea that we have about what exists beyond space, right? So obviously, it was very, very important to actually make sure that it is very important to make sure that we knew or had a fair idea of what space was like. So obviously, when we were doing that, that is why we had to create these things that were durable, and that also eventually resulted in us using these things for in our day-to-day life, right? So another reason as to why we should spend so much of money and head out to space is also because resources actually translate into success and survival. And what I'm trying to say, what I mean when I say that, is that the more resources we have, the more rate of survival we have, right? And like I said earlier, we're currently running out of resources, so obviously it's very important we find new resources, or we actually make use of the already existing renewable resources, right? And we also need to understand that the resources we're currently running out right now is actually non-renewable energy resources, or non-renewable resources like coal or fossil fuel, or even gases, things like that, right? And obviously we've also seen how these resources have polluted the planet a lot, have actually have brought a lot of adverse effects to the planet, and that's why it's very important that we find new resources so that we can increase our chances of survival. Because obviously we're still making progress, and even though we have made a lot of progress, there's still so much progress to be made. Because although we feel like the future is right now, and I'm talking about 2021, even though we feel like the future is right now, in a few more years this is not going to be the future. In a few more years, 2021 is going to be the past. So that's why it's very, very important to invest in these things and to constantly keep testing ourselves, okay? Because the more we keep exploring, the more we keep testing ourselves, our limits, the better it's going to be for us, because we're eventually going to develop, we're going to find so many different things. And maybe like all those newspaper articles back then that said in the 21st century we'd have flying cars, we'd eventually have flying cars, and we'd eventually travel through those flying cars. And that's why it's very, very important for us to invest in space, because eventually we'll end up using all these technologies that we send to space. We will be using it in our daily lives, so things like flying cars, or even to increase the efficiency of how vehicles function, and that kind of thing. Right now, another thing that we need to understand is that in terms of resources, if we do find new resources, it's way more than physical assets, right? And what I mean when I say that is, you have physical assets, sure, it exists for it exists for a while, it serves its purpose, but eventually, like every other thing, it it ends too. You run out of it, obviously, because nothing is infinite, nothing is limitless, unless of course we're talking about the renewable energy and things like that. But also we need to understand that even though these things are renewable, even though we talk of sun as this limitless source of energy, the sun is also a star, which means that sooner or later the sun will also die, and that means life on Earth will cease to exist. So that is why we need to keep exploring space. That is why we need to make sure we explore space, because if life on Earth ceases to exist, we need to make sure that we can sustain life elsewhere. And given the fact that we're humans, that we're easily adaptable, that we've evolved into being more adaptable, it means that we can actually explore space. It means that we can actually sustain life on another planet. And if that planet already has conditions like planet Earth, obviously it's not going to be too hard for us to actually go there and sustain life on that other planet. Okay, so obviously we need to understand that there's so many good things about exploring space. There's so many advantages of exploring space, and there's also a lot of wonders and explanations of how the universe was formed and how it works. But while understanding all of that, and while keeping all of that in mind, we also need to understand that obviously space also holds a lot of dangers. And a lot of changes because we haven't explored the entirety of space, because space is so huge. We haven't even cracked, it's still the tip of the iceberg, if I put it that way. We're still on the tip of the iceberg, and there's so much more that we need to explore rather. There's so much more we need to find out. And because we've only, seen such little of the planet, or rather of space, it's very important that we also keep in mind that space actually has a lot of dangers. And what I mean when I say that actually is that there are so many chances of a large asteroid or even a comet coming and hitting Earth. And there has been instances that has happened, though obviously it has narrowly missed Earth, or it has landed elsewhere and actually, made sure that we don't destruct as a planet. But obviously this risk exists, and obviously that's why dinosaurs are extinct right now, and we know that that's how dinosaurs actually died. So obviously we have that risk of an asteroid or a comet coming and hitting Earth is there, even though it is a small chance. It still exists, right? But obviously, given time, it will eventually happen. Now, even though it's small, chances are it will eventually happen. Sometimes a planet might just get destroyed by a comet. But the thing is, when we invest in space technology, when we invest in things like that, we can make sure that our technology can actually detect such a threat, so we can actually do something about it. Because if we see a comet coming, then we could probably find ways to destroy it, or reduce the amount of pressure it hits Earth with. Because end of the day, space is huge, and there is so many different threats out there as well. So obviously we need to keep exploring space. We need to make sure we keep doing what we're doing, simply to make sure that we can protect our planet, and we can also gain what is most advantageous to us, and what is most beneficial to us, right? So obviously, because those things exist, because we have so many dangers out there, because while so many positive and negative things exist, it's very important that we keep researching, we keep exploring, and we keep investing in space and in space technology. So obviously, like I said earlier, right now Earth is the only planet that is known to sustain life. But like I said before, that's probably because we haven't really explored that much of space. Obviously, we're currently exploring Mars, and we've tried to explore other planets through with humans, and even with special machines, robots, if I may. So obviously, even though we're still on the tip of the iceberg, there's still so many other planets out there that we haven't even come across, right? And this means that there's obviously planets out there, like there are other planets, there are moons, there are so many other things that could eventually allow us to inhabit life on those planets. So obviously, it's very, very important that you invest in this. It's very important that we spend money, we spend time and resources in investing in space exploration, because it is our future. It is going to help us. And while there are significant disadvantages to it, it's also hard to miss the fact that there is a lot of advantages to it. So obviously, when we're thinking about that, when we're discussing that, it's very important to have these things in our mind as well. And like I said, because we ourselves as a planet is struggling so much to make sure that we survive, make sure that our resources are enough for us, our resources are enough for our future generations, we have to still take that extra effort, put in that effort to make sure that we can find new resources to make sure our children and our planet is safe as well. So obviously, keeping all those things in mind, it's very important that while we're still at this, that we still keep exploring, we keep exploring space, we keep putting energy and resources into it. Right now, obviously, with that being said, it's time for me to head into a little break, but don't worry, because we'll be back to talk about all things related to space and more things related to space, so make sure you stay tuned.
But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, you've had one to forget, God, there'd be an inquest. Why did you reject my son? Well, I haven't rejected your son.
I want to talk about, how the generation gap, has how much it's changed, especially when you check the youth nowadays in comparison, to people back in the day.
I'd say when I was younger, it was more disciplined. Not now.
In comparison to now.
Not at all. Not now. The way things are nowadays, the younger generation, you seem that they can't accept the word no. If that makes sense. They can't accept
rejection, essentially, is all you're trying to say.
Yeah, they can't accept the word no. So if you how did I do? Well, you didn't do very well. And they get upset. And when I was a youngster, my father used to say to me, because I used to be sport mad when I was very young, well, I still am sport mad, but like participating in different sports. And if I had a bad game, for example, he'd say to me, you had one to forget. That's it.
Your dad sounds like a smart guy. I mean, yeah, that's the real fact of the matter, yeah.
He'd say to me, you had one to forget. Get over it. And that was it. So I dust myself down and do it again. But now, if you say to a child, if I went up to a child and said, you've had one to forget, God, there'd be an inquest. An inquest. They'd have to me, why did you reject my son? Oh, I haven't rejected your son. Or daughter. I've just told them that they need to buck their ideas up.
That's the truth right there. I mean, if you think about it, if you check the generations, like right now in the US as well, I've seen a lot of these things as well. In the UK, you get medals for participation. But what's the point? What are you trying to? Yeah, what's the point? Either you win or you lose. People are so afraid to put that whole notion of losing. When it comes to right now, the generation gap is just crazy. How much. A lot has changed. Social media has taken control of our lives, and we don't even realize it anymore. We're crippled because of it.
That's absolutely right, Nick. Because, as you said, nowadays it seems that you get rewarded for failure. For the life of me, Nick, I can't get my head around that. Perhaps I'm just getting old and morbid. I don't know. I just can't get my head around how you could be rewarded for failure.
The Kaleidoscope.
Hey, it's your girl Sarah right here on Relaks Radio. And earlier we were talking about space exploration and everything related to space. So if you are just tuning in, that's what we were talking about. I'm Sarah and this is the Kaleidoscope. And I'll be keeping you company all the way until 9 a.m. Good morning. And I'm so excited to be here because we're having a very interesting conversation right now about space exploration. All right. And if you are very interested in what we're talking about, if you're interested in the conversation that we're having, then it's always good to go and follow our socials, which is Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Okay, and obviously, if you follow us on these on our socials, you can find out so much more about everything we do, everything we talk about, and you can also obviously be a part of this conversation. Now, we were talking about space exploration and why space exploration is the future. And if you have any questions, any opinions, any thoughts that you would like to share about it, make sure you text me on 078-52-473-473 and we can finally get into it and start talking about it. Because space exploration is something that I've been excited about always. I've always been excited about it, even from a young age, because the stars used to fascinate me so much. Okay, so obviously I'm very excited to be here and tell you about the stars, about space, and why we should be, or rather why we should continue our space exploration. Okay, so if you have anything you would like to share, if there's anything you want me to talk about, then make sure you text me on the number and we can have the conversation. Now let's talk about why space exploration is actually the future. Because to be quite honest, a lot of people think our planet is dying, and it's very hard not to think about our planet like that, because we've already seen the ruin and we've already seen a lot of the damage that we've done to the planet actually, finally showing its effects, right? I'm talking about things like climate change, global warming, how things have changed so much, how there are so many animal populations out there that are extinct, or almost or they are endangered, they're almost on the verge of extinction. So obviously it's important when we know that our planet isn't actually having the best of its time right now, to put it that way, because it kind of looks like it's very hard for people to think that our planet isn't dying, but many people believe that it is. And because a lot of people believe that our planet is dying, because there's so many things that are actually showing that our planet isn't, that our planet is actually going through a crisis right now. We're having a climate crisis. We also need to make sure that we need to explore into space, right? And that is obviously because if our planet is facing a crisis, if our planet is dying, then that means that we need to find another way to sustain life. And obviously we've had all these movies, we've had theories, so many theories every year about how the world is going to end, how there's going to be an apocalypse, or there's going to be zombies who come and try to kidnap you and eat you alive, and that kind of thing. You know what I'm talking about. We've seen it in movies all the time, and there's always at least one zombie movie that gets released every year. So you know what I'm talking about. You know how we've had these ideas, how everyone thinks there's an apocalypse and whatnot. So obviously when those things are happening, it's very important that we keep exploring space. Now obviously we know that global warming isn't the only threat to our planet. We know climate change is not the only threat to our planet. There are so many other different threats, right? And some of them we haven't even found out, some of them we haven't even explored, and some of them we don't even know about. So obviously because we aren't too sure about them, and because we don't know what these threats are about, we need to make sure that we invest in space. So obviously that is why space exploration is also the future. And and a lot of people out there, even a lot of scientists, actually believe that space exploration will help us find this planet B. And when we're exploring space, a huge question that all of us have is whether aliens exist. And obviously that's a question that everyone has, and it's been there ever since space exploration started, and probably even before then, when we were thinking of what existed beyond our planet, right? So obviously whether aliens exist, how they would communicate, what kind of civilizations they have, and how they survive is something that we've always been curious about. It's something that we've always talked about. So obviously when that's the case, there's always this huge question, the age old question of whether aliens exist. So obviously, do aliens exist, and what evidence do they have, and what evidence do we have to show that aliens exist, or if they don't? Now there is a lot of speculation about this unclassified report that is going to be released by the Pentagon, on on unidentified flying objects. Sometimes you get tongue twisted, and everything is so confusing sometimes. But anyway, there's going to be a report that is going to be released by the Pentagon about UFOs, right? And obviously that we don't necessarily know what this report is about, and we don't necessarily know if there will be any link on it, if there will be any link between aliens and UFOs in this report. But it's supposed to be released on the 25th of June. And we know that there have been a lot of UFO sightings. We know that there has been so many different questions, so many different even visions or things we've seen and things we think we saw, that we consider to be an unidentified flying objects. So obviously, when you have so many information, and obviously when people they themselves say that they've seen aliens or they've come across this, it's very hard to actually figure out what kind of aliens we're talking about. Okay, and obviously even though a link hasn't been established yet between UFOs and aliens, a research was actually conducted by this group, and they asked 5 scientists if they thought aliens existed. And obviously, out of the 5 scientists, 4 of them actually said that aliens exist. Now, what you need to understand is that when people are saying aliens exist, that doesn't always mean these green, scrawny creatures with oval heads that we always see in movies or in these conspiracy theory videos, right? Aliens aren't always these technologically advanced creatures. It could also be new types of bacteria. It could be new forms of life, and it doesn't always have to be these green scrawny creatures that we see when we're watching movies about space, or when we're watching documentaries or even conspiracy theory videos about aliens. Okay, so obviously 4 of those researchers said yes, and 1 researcher said no. So now we'll actually talk about why they said yes and why they said no. So they actually said yes because our galaxy is really huge, right? And we don't know where exactly we are, because we have also just found out just one part of this huge universe, right? So and how sure are we that our galaxy is the only galaxy that exists, right? There are so many galaxies out there, galaxies we haven't even found, galaxies we haven't even come across. And obviously because of that, there is a lot of questions about aliens and where they would exist, how we could communicate with them, right? So obviously, given the fact that space is huge, given the fact that space exploration is just on the tip of the iceberg, we don't actually know where these aliens exist, and we don't know if they are too far away from us or where exactly they are for us to communicate with them. And we also don't know if those aliens we're talking about are actually quite technologically advanced um, you know, if they're quite technologically advanced, or if they're just, bacteria. Like if the alien was a form of bacteria or whatever, then how would you communicate with it? Obviously, those are so many questions that we have. Now, obviously, the very possible answer is, to communicate them using radio waves, which is currently, what we have tried to as well. But obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty when it comes to it. There's a lot of things that we aren't too sure about. So obviously, those are things that we need to consider when we're talking about exploring space, and when we're talking about if aliens exist, right? And another scientist actually said that we don't know how long it will be when we can finally communicate with these aliens, because like I said, we don't know where exactly across the universe they're scattered, right? They could be on a different galaxy altogether, or they could even be in a different planet altogether. So we don't really know where they are, and we don't know what kind of creatures or what kind of aliens they are. But obviously it remains to be seen if these aliens that we're talking about, regardless of whether they're bacteria or of regardless of whether they're a technologically advanced civilization, it still remains to be seen whether we can actually communicate with them. So obviously, because we're still trying to figure out how to communicate with them, because we're still trying to figure out how we can actually get across to them, it's very, very important that we still keep investing in space, right? Now I've already established as to why we need to invest in space, why we need to spend our resources and our time investing in space, because it's very, very important that we find certain things. It's very important that we evolve our technology. It's very important that we create a sort of technology where we can detect threats if there are any, and that we can actually help to save our planet, or even to find another planet that we could live in, or to expand human life in another planet. And obviously, you've seen in all these sci-fi movies where people are going to a different planet. For example, the movie Passengers, they're moving into a different planet altogether to start a new life, to start a new civilization of humankind. So obviously, when things like that exist, it's very, very important that we actually invest in space, and we keep continuing our research and whatnot. Now, if you're just tuning in, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about space, we're talking about space exploration, we're talking about everything related to space. So obviously, if you have any questions related to space, if you have any opinions related to space, if you have any thoughts or any other thing that you would want me to talk about, you would want me to share, then make sure you text me on 07852473473 so we can talk about it. But right now, let's actually get into a little break, because there's so much more that we need to talk about when it comes to space. There's so many different things we need to tackle, and there's also a little bit of news, like I mentioned earlier, about space exploration, about what UK is currently doing about space, and what other progress other countries have made, right? So obviously, considering all of those, there's so much to talk about, so make sure you stay tuned. But right now, let's get into a little break.
Climb Mount Everest. That is one of that's in my bucket list. You're laughing, but that is the facts right there. I'd love to do that. That is something I'm looking forward to do, hopefully.
Climb Everest.
Mount Everest. I mean, okay, not the very tip of Mount Everest, maybe the base camp at least.
You're talking about mental health. Well, if you went out and got some exercise in the fresh air, that will improve your mental health. It will make you feel better.
That's true. That is true. I wholeheartedly agree. But then for some people, it's how do you find the motivation to, especially when it comes to riding a bicycle, to do it again and again and again and again? It's a cycle that you have to be used to. How do you do it? What makes you wake up in the morning and decide, hey, I'm going to pick my bike up today. I'm going to cycle. What makes you want to do that?
What makes me want to do that?
Yeah. What do you like? What could you give listeners, like people listening in right now? What kind of tip could you give them?
Well, the first tip I would give them, if you haven't tried it before, try it. It can open up new horizons. It will make you fitter. It will definitely make you fitter. Cycling is one of the best forms of aerobic exercise you can do.
It sounds like, if you think about it, yeah, it sounds like great fun. Because what essentially you're trying to say is also at the same time, when if you look at it from this perspective, with regards to mental health, especially when you look at it with mental health, this is another way to fight it. I feel like you go outside, you meet more people, you interact with, socially, you will interact with more people, and you're keeping fit, you're making connections, you're breathing in the good and exhaling the bad. I feel like that's a great thing right there.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got a better way with words than I have, I'll tell you. But you're quite right. What you say there.
I mean, I've been doing this for quite some time. I mean, hey, you'll get the hang of it.
I've been doing it for about 10 minutes now, so yeah.
That I can never really understand people staying in one room the whole day when you can have the world to see. I am a traveler. I travel. I love traveling. Traveling is just one of the things I do. And yeah, on top of my bucket list was, to one time, hopefully when I get there, go to Nepal and climb Mount Everest. That is that's in my bucket list. You're laughing, but that is the facts right there. I'd love to do that. That is something I'm looking forward to do, hopefully.
Climb Everest.
Mount Everest. I mean, okay, not the very tip of Mount Everest, maybe the base camp at least.
Base camp, yeah.
At least.
Would you be able to cycle there?
Oh.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh, so that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Ladies who ask, "Hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful?" I mean, hey, you can always have something up on your sleeve. I mean, got me thinking. You want to stand out. Why do you want to stand out though so much, especially with these kind of shirts when you're riding? There must be a purpose behind it, right?
Well, when you say a purpose, Nick, what I do, I wear the shirts, mainly one because they're nice and bright, so they make me visible, especially if I'm riding on the road.
Okay. I mean, yeah, that's very important, right? Because you want cars, yeah.
Very important. And also, like, people see me in like calves, and perhaps I shouldn't be saying this on here, I suppose, but in the bar afterwards.
All right.
And it gives them something to look at, and it makes them laugh. It makes them laugh, so that's why I do it.
Oh, and it could be a really good pickup line as well. Ladies who ask, "Hey, excuse me, so why are you wearing something so colorful?" I mean, hey, you can always have something up on your sleeve. I mean, you look like a guy who would do.
You know me too well. You know me too well, Nick.
The Kaleidoscope.
Hey, you're with your girl Sarah right here on the Kaleidoscope, and we're talking about space exploration and what kind of future it holds for humankind, especially when it comes to space exploration, and what kind of things we need to do and what kind of resources we need to invest when it comes to space exploration. And if you're just tuning in earlier, we were talking about why space exploration is the future, why we're currently in the future, and why we need to make sure we keep exploring, why we keep exploring why we keep exploring space, and why we keep investing in resources to make sure space exploration is something good. So obviously that's what we were talking about. You're hanging with me, Sarah, and if you just tuned in, well, that's what we were talking about. A very good morning, and if you have any questions, if you have any messages, thoughts, opinions that you would like to share with us, then you can text me on 07852-473-473, and we can have that conversation about space exploration. We can have a conversation about whether we're doing the right thing, what kind of changes we need to make, and what kind of steps we need to take as well. So obviously that's what we were talking about, and that's why we need to focus on this. We need to focus on it a little bit as well. Okay, but right now I told you a little while back that we will actually be focusing on a little bit of news that was mentioned earlier in the day about space exploration and what kind of steps we have taken. So obviously it's very, very important for me to tell you about it, because I did tell you that I will eventually get into it. So obviously the news item that I was talking about was how we in the United Kingdom are actually planning to open a spaceport by 2022. And obviously this is a project that is being done by Spaceport Cornwall, and that what they're trying to do through that is actually they're planning to send probes to Mars, Venus, and the Moon within the next 3 or 4 years. And this was actually said by Virgin Orbit. That's the organization, Virgin Orbit's chief executive. And that is very interesting news. That means that there's something that we need to look forward to. This is something huge, especially because a lot of these plans, a lot of these things that we had to do, especially when it came to space exploration, had to be postponed simply because of the pandemic, right? So obviously because of this, it means that now with things slowly getting back to normal, the vaccination drive happening, so many things getting back to normal, it is important that we now focus on these things that we used to focus on before the pandemic. So obviously it's very, very important that we focus on these things, and it's very important for you to know the news as well, because in the morning when you wake up, you want to know news, you want to know what happened last night, you want to know what happened within the past day. And it's very important to keep track, and it's very important to know your news as well, because it actually really helps to be aware of your surrounding. So obviously it's very important. It's an important step even for the United Kingdom, right here in Britain, especially because this means that we're now actually evolving in terms of space exploration. It means we're finally taking these huge steps to make sure that we can finally start traveling to space. And especially the project they're doing right now to open a spaceport by 2022 is a huge step that they're taking. Okay, so obviously Sir Richard Branson's rocket company is actually also aiming to open this new Quay-based spaceport by spring 2022, and they also believe that they can launch the first satellites from British soil. Now that's a huge thing. We can finally open the spaceport. We can have satellites being launched from Britain, and that means the future is now, and it is like literally now. And I'm not even just saying that, because the future is now. We're finally exploring space. Opportunities are being opened up for people to go into space, for people to explore space. And I'm talking about normal people like you and I. It obviously people who can afford it, because space exploration or going out to space is actually really, really expensive. But it means that eventually we'll get into a point where normal people like you and I can also afford to go to space, because that is what the future is. And especially because they're sending these satellites, they're opening up spaceports, they're opening up space stations, and even space hotels. That means there is a lot to look forward to. So obviously it was hoped that this horizontal launch site could actually be operational by October this year, but obviously because of the pandemic, also because of a lot of the unseen circumstances that we're currently going through, this obviously had to be delayed. And because of that, the date in which this would all be operational, in which we could start working on this, actually had to be postponed, or it had to be put forward in time to make sure that we could finally get back into what we were doing before the pandemic. Now, also Dan Hart said that lunar missions and smaller crafts could actually be bound for Venus and Mars from Spaceport Cornwall within the next 3 or 4 years. Now, that is huge, because now we're not just talking about exploring Mars, we're also talking about exploring Venus, and even sending other not small, but rather sending other specialized machines to explore things like the moon and other different things. So obviously it means that we're progressing at a rate so fast, we're evolving so fast, and that means that we can actually bring about a lot of change through this. So the future is finally now. We earlier we were talking about how we need to invest in space, because space exploration is the future, how we're currently running out of resources in our own planet, and why it's so important for us to actually make sure that there are enough resources for us. So if you're just tuning in, we're talking about space hotels, we're talking about space stations, and everything space related right here on the Kaleidoscope with me, Sarah. And earlier, we were just talking about how space exploration is actually the way to the future. Now, some things that need to be highlighted, obviously, is the fact that our planet is actually in the process of slowly dying. And although a lot of people don't want to believe it, it is very obvious that it is happening right now. So, obviously, we need to come to terms with that. We need to find new resources. We need to find new planets that we can sustain human life on. And because that is the case, because we're trying to find new planets to sustain human life on, it's very important that we explore space, that we invest in space, and that we actually take these necessary steps for our future. And another thing that I was also talking about was aliens, because whenever we talk about space, the first thing that comes to your mind is aliens. So we were talking about how scientists said that aliens exist, and how some scientists said that aliens don't exist. Now, the reason he mentioned, or the scientist mentioned, that aliens don't exist was actually simply because of the fact that we don't know yet about all these unseen galaxies and unseen planets. And what he meant when he said that there are no aliens is simply not that they don't exist, but simply we don't have enough information to know if they actually exist or not, right? Even though we've seen multiple sightings of UFOs, even though the Pentagon is going to be releasing this new document or this new report about UFOs, it's still a lot of it. Still a lot of uncertainties when it comes to it. There's still so many different things that we need to think about. There's so many different things that we need to keep in mind, and obviously, because there are so many things that we need to keep in mind, because all these uncertainties exist, we are not too sure about whether aliens exist or not. However, having said that, that doesn't mean that they don't exist. And I told you earlier when we we're talking about aliens, it's not always those green creatures we see every time we're watching this movie about aliens or space exploration, that it can even sometimes be something very different. So obviously that's what I was about. But and I was actually talking about the UK, or our country, and how we have also taken these steps to get into space. How we have taken these, how we plan to launch a spaceport by next year, and how the first satellites of this spaceport will be launched from British soil, which is a big achievement, which is something to be proud of, especially because of everything a country is going through right now, everything a government is also doing to make sure everyone is safe, to make sure everyone is protected. It's a huge thing for everyone, to actually, talk about space, to actually be able to launch the spaceboat by next year, and to finally be able to explore space. So another thing that I obviously need to talk about is space hotels. Now, that is also something that has been trending. That is something that is being spoken a lot. And there's also the first space hotel that is going to be fully operational by 2027. Now, it's called the Voyager Station, and it's actually supposed to begin construction by 2026. And like I mentioned earlier, it will be fully operational by 2027. Now, that is a huge step we're taking, because when we're talking about space hotels, we're talking about space tourism, right? Which means that people can now go to space, people can spend time with their friends or their families, especially if they're rich enough, they can go to space and have this experience of both Earth and space together. So it's a combined experience of things on space and things on Earth as well. And you can actually go into this hotel and spend time there. So how this hotel works, or how this hotel is designed, is it has 24 modules. And while it's not necessarily going for the very cliche, basic, very stereotypical view or stereotypical presentation of space hotels in space movies and science fiction movies, that actually trying to make things a bit different, right? So this space hotel has a bar, it has all these things that you would do back while you're in Earth, but it also combines elements of space. For example, there are huge windows that you can look into space. There are different activities that they can do, especially things like jumping up or lifting heavy things, especially because gravity is so much more different out in space than right here on Earth. So because of that, that means that there's a lot of things that people can actually focus on, different activities that they can do related to space, and also they also have a little touch of Earth to make them feel like they're not too far away from home. So that is what the Voyager station is doing now. They also plan to, um, the people, actually people who are part of the Voyager station, actually want to introduce this concept called the Starship culture. And to put it simply, the Starship culture is this culture where people are going to space and living in space and working in space and, doing what they want in space. So obviously it's this culture we're trying to inculcate in people. We're trying to normalize and say, look, space, going to space, space exploration isn't something only for scientists. It isn't something only for people who work at NASA or who work in the European Space Agency. It's not only for people like that, but it is also something that's open to normal people like us, people who have, very routinal lives, people who do other jobs that aren't always related to science and aren't always related to space exploration. So that is what they're trying to do with Starship culture. They want to make sure that people can travel to space whenever they want, and they can live in space, for a short period of time, or they can constantly go back and forth to space. Now that's very important because they also believe that there's a huge demand for this sort of culture, especially given the fact that, look, every time, okay, because we're in the middle of a pandemic right now, and because a lot of us haven't been able to go out and haven't been able to go out to, vacation spots the same way we used to. And I'm talking about places like Bali, Maldives, and so many other beautiful places that we haven't been able to go to simply because of the pandemic. Now, when you think of a vacation, the first thing that comes to your mind is, oh, okay, maybe I could finally step out, get into a plane, and go to the Maldives, or maybe I could finally go to somewhere that is tropical, or even somewhere that is, very different to what the kind of environment and the kind of climate that we have right here in London. So obviously, because of that, now instead of thinking of going to Bali or even Maldives, you can think of going to space. Oh, hey, maybe this year I feel like taking a trip to space, so that's what I'm going to do. Now those are the kind of things that they want to inculcate in people, because they believe that there is a higher demand for people to actually go to space and talk about going to space and actually involve themselves in space exploration, in space tourism, and so many other things. So if you actually take a minute and think about it, the future is really exciting, because there's so many things in the future you could look forward to. There's so many different things you can explore, and there's so many different things that you can actually be excited about, because now it's not the very routine thing of going out to, when you want to meet your family who lives on the other end of the world. It's just take a plane and just go there. But now you and your family can just go to space, because hey, you feel like having a holiday, well, go to space. But the thing is, space tourism right now is very expensive. It costs about £250,000 to actually go to, for a person to go to space for one day. Okay, and obviously that is quite expensive. That means right now, for you to be able to explore space, for you to be a part of space tourism, you need to be really rich. But what they're trying to do with Starship culture is actually make sure to try to make it less expensive, to make it feel like what you would feel if you went to Disneyland for what you would feel if you went to Disneyland. They're trying to make it very affordable for people. So that's the future, and that is what that is about. And I really hope you enjoyed this talk, this conversation about space exploration. But stay tuned, because I'll be back again to talk about so many other things. For example, what I'll be talking about next is actually the toy industry, something that is very important. Something, toys is something we've all been with at one point in our lives, especially, when we were children. Toys used to be so fun. I know I'm not really a child now, but I still play with toys because it's fun, and I'm talking about things like board games, even Barbie dolls. I love Barbie dolls, and I know you wouldn't expect someone as old as me to say that, but I do love Barbie dolls, and we will be talking about the toy industry. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But right now, I gotta go. But don't worry, because I'll be here in a few more minutes, and we will be talking about the toy industry.